Hi, and welcome to this AI in C# video, where we'll be covering the different options you have to use LLMs in C# in 2025. So we'll be covering Semantic Kernel, Microsoft Extensions AI, and the newest addition, Microsoft Agent Framework. So let's quickly have a look at the three. Semantic Kernel is the oldest, releasing back in March 2023. And then came along in 2024 October, Microsoft Extensions AI, and now in October 2025, we now have the Microsoft Agent Framework. All of them else are exactly the same. It's the Microsoft that are maintainer of all of the three. Two of them, Semantic Kernel and Microsoft Agent Framework, being the same team, while Microsoft Extensions AI is the .NET team. Else, they're all free. They're all MIT licenses, and they're all released as NuGet packages. So let's do some side-by-side comparison of them. First up, we just have chat. In Semantic Kernel, you needed to make something called a kernel builder and add a kind of mini dependency injection, which was a little funky, but it worked. Then you made a chat completion agent where you could give your instructions to the agent, the system instructions. And then you did an invoke async on your question. And for some reason, it was for each back, not needed really, but that was the way it was done. Extensions AI is a more low-level system, so it doesn't have the concept of agents. And for that reason, it needs to just make a raw client to whatever you use, in this case, Azure OpenAI, and then it turns it into an iChat client that can be used to do this. And the response is fairly concise, but if you need system message or instructions, it's always something you need to put into the individual response, which is kind of low level and to me, one of the most annoying things about Extensions AI. But else, it's a very concise system. Microsoft Agent Framework take the best of both worlds. It still does the same as Extensions AI by newing up the raw client, but instead of as an iChat client, it says create AI agents. And here you can directly give the instructions, and they are kept so they will be sent with every call to the agent. So you just make a run async and get your response back, which is more or less the same as the chat response. In general, these two are very much alike, but with the agent on top, it makes Agent Framework more easy, in my opinion. When it comes to tool calling, they can all do that. Semantic Kernel need to have special classes that are decorated with a kernel function. And then we do the same stuff again, but on the kernel, we import the plugin, as they call them, into the kernel. And then when we do the agent, we need to tell it with a bunch of kernel arguments and Azure AI prompts here that it's allowed to call them, else it won't call them. And then you just do the normal loop for chat and you use the tool. Extensions AI uses delegate methods for tools, so you can either just assign them using an AI function create here, or you can use some reflection to find all your functions in a class. Again, we need to have the system message out by itself. But beyond that, it is very simple, and we don't need to tell that it's allowed to call them. They are auto tool calling by default. Agent Framework is exactly the same, but whenever you create your agent, you can tell which tools that agent have available. Down here, you needed to tell what tools you wanted to use for each individual call. Here you can define all the calls on the agent and just make your different calls. But beyond that, they are very much the same. They're using the same way of defining tools. So a little more easy because of the agents, but nothing more than that. When it comes to structured output, they all use some kind of output object, in this case a person. Semantic kernel needs to, on the agent, say that agent should always give a response format of the type of the person, in this case, and then normally call, and the message back here would be a JSON string that you then need to deserialize. Extension AI make it much easier in that you have a generic method of the call to the LLM, where you just give the object that you want back, and then you get that back as a response. So you get your object. So you don't need to tell anything what type it is that happens in the call, and you don't need to deserialize yourself. Agent Framework does the same, but of course, again, have the agent part, and it needs to do a run async instead of a get response async, but else they are exactly the same. There is certain type of agents that can do this, meaning the chat client agents are the only ones that can do it, but they have some more advanced agents that are not allowed to use structured output. Other concepts, well, if we do a little side-by-side comparison, the number of NuGets you need in order to do Hello World is 2 in each one of them. And you can see the names here. Embeddings, Microsoft Extension AI is the only one who have embeddings. The two others leverage them. Semantic Kernel had an old one, but I haven't listed it here because nowadays, if you use Semantic Kernel, you just leverage Microsoft Extension AI. Agents, Semantic Kernel, and Agent Framework have that concept, while Extensions AI, being a more low-level system, you need to more control your own system messages and stuff like that. So everything happens on each individual call instead of defining everything on an agent and then working from there. Workflows, Semantic Kernel have a workflow, they call it process framework, and Agent Framework, of course, have the workflows. Extensions AI don't have that concept, so you can't leverage that. Agentic workflows is something Agent Framework have picked up from their other team called Autogen, and that's now in the Agent Framework. It wasn't really in the Semantic Kernel, and again, Microsoft Extensions AI don't have any concept of this. Vector stores is something neither Extensions AI or Agent Framework have. They have the embeddings, but they don't have anything to actually put it up into a vector store like Azure AI Search or into a SQL Server or something like that. For that, something called Microsoft Extensions Vector Data exists. It's a NuGet package, and that NuGet package actually lives inside Semantic Kernel. At some point, Semantic Kernel need to pull it out because it's not really Semantic Kernel that have the support for vector stores. It's just a NuGet package that the Semantic Kernel repo owns that have that support. So it's only in namespace only that they support it, while the others don't. But in real life, you will still use this part over in Agent Framework or in Extensions AI if you use that for it. If we need to give some props to each one of them. What is they better at than any of the others? Well, semantic kernel is better at setting reasoning effort on LLMs. So, if you, for example, have ChatGPT 5, you need to set between minimal, low, medium, or high in reasoning effort, and it has a nice little thing on your agent that you can just set that value. Neither Extensions AI or Agent Framework have this. So for that reason, technically, semantic kernel is better at setting them. All of the three can do it, but it's just better. It's more cumbersome over here. Extensions AI is better at embeddings because it's the only one who can do it as such. So I don't really know if you can make it better by being the only one who can. While Agent Framework is better at chat, it's more concise than Agent Framework, and because of the system information you can put directly on the agents, it's easier. It's better at agents. The agents are much more evolved than semantic kernels. It's better at workflows. It's a new version of the workflow, and the agentic workflow is the only one that is over here. When it comes to LLMs, Extensions AI and Agent Framework are exactly the same because they both leverage that anything that supports an iChat client, it can support. And that's virtually everything out there. Semantic kernel has its own connectors, which is a problem, of course, because if new features come along, they need to implement it instead of just leveraging the raw clients like the two others do. But they do support OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, AI Foundry, Google, offline modes, which is also, of course, supported by the two others. And they have a sort of connection to Claude. So unless you're using the OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, I would be more worried sticking with semantic kernel in having those. So that's everything I have for you in terms of comparison. I'm definitely gonna stick with Agent Framework. I find Extensions AI too low level, too much extra work here and there compared to what Agent Framework can do. And on top of that, it gives all the nice workflows as well. And semantic kernel, I see it as a legacy product now that Agent Framework will supersede in every way. I think there's one thing with Amazon Bedrock agents that are not supported yet in Agent Framework, but beyond that, it can do everything that the semantic kernel could do, say for the vector stores, of course, which again is just a namespace only that is there. So that is the only place I will ever use a NuGet package going forward, and I will be migrating all my semantic kernel over to Agent Framework, which in turn then just use the Extensions AI behind the scenes for the low-level stuff. So that's everything. See you in the next one.